Thanks, AJ. Thanks, Jock. I'm going to talk a little bit about innovation. And really, the title here is about impactful innovation. Let me get this going here. Oh, and back to the disclaimers. Murphy's Law, we have the gardener here, so it's just going to get really loud in the background.
Okay, no worries. Just let's talk over it.
We'll get through it.
It'll be interesting enough. We'll all be glued to what you have to say, Alan, so don't worry about it.
Right. Thanks. So in terms of innovation, everybody talks about it. Everybody's excited about it. People, if it's SpaceX or quantum computing or autonomous vehicles or things like that, it's all about kind of the next big thing. And there's a common belief in industry and within companies that innovation is going to cure all the ills and it's going to be the way to get to the next thing. And I always bristle a little bit about these big, broad claims about it being the panacea. But innovation certainly is important, and there's certainly a role for it. One of the things that we found is that in our work, having a more structured and disciplined approach to thinking about it and defining it and approaching it ends up making it a lot more useful and impactful in a business sense. So, here there, as I mentioned, you see these magazine covers all over talking about innovation and how great and important it is. A number of quotes by some pretty important leaders around the value of innovation in terms of leading towards the future and differentiating from competition and really being critical to growth and the economy in general. So what we've done here in the middle of the slide is put maybe a better working definition of innovation. It's not just about the next whiz-bang thing, but it's really a process of translating an idea or an invention into a good or service that creates value for which customers will pay. So that kind of takes it away from the invention for invention's sake or kind of the science realm of just raw discovery. And it's more about really creating something that's going to be impactful to an end user and that's going to create some sort of economic value. And, with that working definition, we have a strong belief that innovation really holds the promise for transforming the competitiveness of companies and improving the effectiveness of R&D in the face of declining budgets. So from a government standpoint, as well as from a company standpoint, R&D is harder and harder to do, and budgets are always constrained. And so what this becomes a channel for, I guess, being more impactful with the budget that you have available. So let me talk a little bit about the changing landscape and how it's presenting opportunities. This graph here on the right hasn't been updated in a few years, but it was really showing how R&D spending has changed in this country over time. And if you go back to the mid-'60s and the Cold War and the Kennedy administration and the space race and things like that, the government was outspending the private sector probably 2 to 1 in terms of R&D. And over time, there's been a really secular shift where now, looking out towards the right side of this chart, it's really flipped. The private sector is more than 2 to 1 outspending the government in terms of R&D spending. And then, it's not portrayed on this graph, but if you do a double click on this green line in terms of the non-federal spending, you'll see that it's really a lot more of small companies that are doing R&D as opposed to the older model of these large, IBM or Xerox and their Xerox Park facility, or Exxon had its huge research facility in New Jersey that was doing a lot of really fundamental research into different areas within their respective industries. And now it's much more around smaller companies, venture capital funded startups, really doing bet the company sorts of work on really interesting areas that's driving a lot of the innovation. So it's that combination of commercial leading federal as well as small companies really displacing the larger companies in terms of their R&D spending as a percentage of revenues, as well as kind of the impact of the R&D, and a lot of that being bigger bets in more audacious and adventurous areas where the larger companies end up being maybe more incremental in their thinking. So DoD has recognized this trend, and they want to tap into this innovation stream. Here comes the best part. Background noise. And so, with this, it really gives a tremendous opportunity for aerospace companies and companies within our A&D industry to kind of go beyond some of the structural barriers that they've been facing and think about things a little bit differently. So one of the big trends has been around open innovation systems, and both government and companies have been attempting to do this. Open innovation is moving from the old model of everything happens within my R&D lab to more around, well, I recognize there's a lot of interesting stuff happening all over the place, and I need better outreach and access to all those other things to be able to, bring in the right things. And so the CIA created In-Q-Tel probably 20 years ago or so. So this was a government established venture capital fund where In-Q-Tel was out in the venture community investing in startups. And these were startups that were believed to have some sort of application or interest to the intelligence community. More recently, DoD has created their Defense Innovation Unit. They've set up in Silicon Valley and Austin, Texas, as well as Boston, really technology centers where they've been trying to tap into these non-traditional companies that have been doing interesting things to try to bring in some of those capabilities into the defense industrial base. And then in parallel, A&D companies have been doing similar sorts of things. One of the interesting ones is General Dynamics has their Edge Innovation Network that is really meant to do that sort of thing. It's a lot of outreach. That's one of the examples, and there are many others out there. So let's talk a little bit about how things have changed. So in terms of the old model of innovation versus how things are evolving. The old model was, particularly in the defense sector, the DoD customer was driving R&D and was really paying for all that development. And what's changing is there are a lot of challenges that end up being kind of dual use. So cyber, autonomy, space, and computing are really spanning commercial and defense applications. And we're seeing more and more that the preponderance of the spending is happening in the commercial sector and not for defense or national security applications. And so this is a kind of an opportunity and a challenge to leverage that and access what's happening outside. Also, DoD has actively been shifting their risk to contractors. So instead of DoD really funding everything and paying for all the development, they're asking contractors to be a little bit more adventurous in terms of what they're doing, and that's being pushed down the supply chain. So now there's much more around government expecting industry to foot the bill for some of the early development or some of the more speculative activities. And this has also been maybe exacerbated by the acquisition system. It's really become lumbering and ineffective in certain sorts of needs. And so it's more of a real necessity to kind of go outside that old model for DoD to get really what it needs. The second aspect of the historical model is is the types of innovations that have been happening, right? So it used to be about very discrete technical product characteristics. Is it about speed? Is it about low observability? Is it about range or efficiency? And we saw this in maybe some of the earlier generations of aircraft where, okay, well, this one has to be all about going really fast. And so you ended up with the SR-71, or this one has to be about very high altitude, and you ended up with the U-2. Now the customer needs aren't as monolithic. Part of it is because the threat environment is very dynamic and diverse, and part of it is there's just more to be thinking about, and so it's moving away from these discrete point solutions to much more of a broader set of capabilities. then the third one here around focused development efforts in isolated parts of the company. Again, this was the older model of you had the R&D lab, and those were the guys that were coming up with all the crazy ideas and had autonomy to do everything. And if the ideas didn't come from there, they didn't come from anywhere. To a recognition that it's really too hard to own it all because of product complexity and specialization and cross-disciplinary technologies. And so there's a recognition that innovation really has to be an organic capability across whole organizations as well as across whole industries, where you end up with much more collaboration between companies and their suppliers and up and down the supply chain. And so anyway, those are some of the ways that the innovation landscape is changing, and it really drives a need for different approaches for doing innovation. So what do we have to offer on this front? We've been doing innovation with really some of the leading thinkers and preeminent organizations for years now. We've worked with the Skunk Works and Phantom Works, some of the innovative startups and small companies within the A&D sector, as well as in the commercial sector, who have entered into the defense industry. And through all this work, we've really developed some strong perspectives and powerful frameworks for solving the problems and enhancing capabilities so that clients can really be more effective in doing innovation. One of the big frameworks that we've been using is from Doblin Group. So Larry Keeley and Jay Doblin had developed this concept of the 10 types of innovation. And this has really been a powerful way of thinking about innovation and something that we've been able to adapt and adopt within the aerospace and defense sector, and kind of some of the specific nuances or distinctions of the industry compared to kind of the general commercial sector. One of the key foundations of this 10 types of innovation is a claim or a recognition that innovation isn't just about the product. One of our colleagues, Ted Kasner, would always hold up his pen and say, everybody's thinking about the thing. It's not about the thing, there's more to it. But being an engineer, and many of us within the industry have engineering backgrounds, it really is about there's a lot of focus on the thing and specific performance. Can I make it faster? Can I make better, more resilient? Can I make it higher performance, higher power, whatever it might be? And so that's really this middle part of one of the types of innovation in the middle, around the product offering. And then going a step further, a lot of people talk about the system. So it's not just an individual component, but it's really how it fits within a system. So if you think about Microsoft Office, yeah, people might like Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel or PowerPoint, but one of the things that really makes those powerful is how you can move things across between those applications. And so that system becomes a lot more powerful than the individual components. Setting aside the product offering, and I think there are some interesting statistics around when they've looked at multiple industries and the impact that innovations have had on several companies. What they found is that product offerings innovations are good and interesting, but those don't end up being the big differentiators in terms of commercial performance and commercial success. A lot of it has to do with elements on the left in terms of the company infrastructure, as well as elements on the right in terms of the customer experience. And the idea here is that innovations around the company infrastructure and innovations around the customer experience end up being incredibly impactful. And then not only that, to the extent that you can create innovations across multiple types, so maybe innovations around your network and innovations around the channel, as well as innovations around the product system, that ends up being much more impactful and successful than individual innovations in any one area. So let me talk a little bit about some of the ones here on the left. So the company infrastructure, 4 parts of that. The business model, so unique ways to convert the offerings and services into value and revenue. And so there are examples of this within the A&D space around probably 10, 15 years ago. Scan Eagle, so in situ had the Scan Eagle, and it was a small UAV ISR platform. And instead of trying to sell the airplane to the government, what they said is, you know what, we'll go out and fly it and take video, and we'll just sell you the video. And so they just changed the product and changed the offering. And so it became a very different product profit model associated with that. And that was distinctive and successful and really resonated with the customer. Performance-based logistics might be a similar sort of thing. Instead of selling services by the hour, it's more about selling an outcome. And that becomes distinctive, and that has gotten a lot of traction within the industry. In terms of the network, so again, going back to the idea that you can't own it all and you can't solve all of your customers' problems by yourself, it's really about having a very robust supply chain, as well as really strong partnerships and maybe non-traditional partnerships to be able to bring in resources and capabilities of other companies in unique and interesting ways that create value for the customer. Structure around how you organize, focusing on the assets and capabilities to create higher value. There are examples of this. Whole Foods in the grocery industry, before they were acquired by Amazon, when they were still a standalone company, they actually organized differently than traditional grocery stores. Instead of having the traditional structure where you had a store manager and then all the different departments reported up to that store manager, they were organized functionally. So you would have produce departments all federated across the different stores, and they would collaborate, and they had their accountability into a produce general manager. And so they were able to operate differently, and with those structures, they were more responsive to market needs, supply issues, and things like that, as opposed to the traditional model. And then processes, innovating in terms of the activities and operations that combine to form our core offerings. And so this is, what sorts of business processes are we using to do things differently and create distinctive value for the customer. Moving over to the right side, the customer experience. So customer service ensures that and enhances the utility, performance, and apparent value of our offerings. The channel, so how we go to market. So I had mentioned that in situ example that instead of going into the acquisition space and trying to get procurement dollars, they went in through the O&M budgets. And so it was a very different channel, and they were able to secure contracts and secure funding in a much easier way than one of these multi-year sorts of procurements that would have been slower and probably much more difficult both for them and for their customer. Branding ends up being a way of differentiating and innovating. And then finally, engagement, the way you engage with the customer. So the whole idea here is that it's not just about the product, it's really how you do business in terms of internally, as well as how you face the customer. And the way we use it is we try to identify ways of changing how business is done across both ends of the spectrum. And then, there are a lot of precedents from government contractors as well as commercial companies in terms of how it's applied that end up giving some interesting ideas around what to do differently and how to innovate across those spaces. And most importantly, how to combine multiple innovations across that spectrum to create truly distinctive offerings that are hard to replicate by competitors. We have some examples here across these. So I talked already about some of the examples, but in terms of network, for example, this active engagement with the startup and tech community to identify relevant technologies and suppliers, that's something that's being highly desired by DoD and other government customers. They're struggling a little bit with how to do it. And I think the defense primes are also struggling with how to do it, and just because they are so different in terms of business structure, business processes, how they think about risk. and it's also hard on the private sector, on the commercial side, because these companies have a lot of trepidation around working with the government and the long time cycles and things like that. So there's a learning process and on both sides, and there's really an opportunity to bridge if that can be done successfully. In terms of structure, there are a lot of concerns around industrial base security. And so there's a high premium placed on domestic production of critical components and systems. So a lot of discussion around the integrated circuit market and microelectronics in general. And so to the extent that companies can structure themselves to address some of these concerns, and I think these end up being opportunities that span not just government, but also the commercial and civil sectors. So for example, going back to microelectronics, the whole business concept of placing facilities within the US, and I know there's a lot of investment in Arizona and developing new facilities, is important, but I think that's just part of it. I think part of it also becomes creating more demand for domestically produced products that would have those distinct characteristics around security. And so as we think about the automotive sector and autonomous vehicles and things like that, to the extent that regulations could be put in place, or at least to create more awareness within the market around security risks associated with foreign procurement of critical components, that could actually bolster more demand for these domestic production facilities, and it kind of creates a stronger business case for that sort of thing. On the right side of the spectrum, services, so subscriptions, service level agreements, and alternatives to straight product sales are something that's becoming more and more prevalent within the industry. In terms of the channel, this whole idea of a lot of these products and services end up being dual use, and so making sure that things that are developed for the security community, for the national security customers, end up being relevant or applicable or consumable by commercial companies, ends up being incredibly valuable. So for example, if you think about some sort of cybersecurity solution, if you're only selling to a narrow government customer, that really limits your market. But to the extent that you can design it in a way that it can be sold to commercial customers, then that really opens up your market. And so there's this channel question, and then it goes the other way as well. So if you have some sort of security product that the primary market is the private sector, to the extent that there's the right sort of design heritage within it that makes it procurable by a government entity, that makes it that much more valuable. And then in terms of brand and engagement, to the extent that companies can really create this identity of a dual use solution provider with benefits across markets, that can be incredibly valuable. So in terms of the services that we offer, it's really two big categories. One is around capabilities, and the other is around actually executing, creating innovations. So on the capability side, it's really around designing processes and structures to help an organization be more effective at innovation. And it's not just about a one-time thing, but it's about this repeatable success. It's around creating the culture, the understanding of the processes, and what the elements of success are, so that the companies can really internalize it and execute this on an ongoing basis. And then the second one, we will work with companies to try to develop innovations to address very specific opportunities or market needs. And so this ends up being very results oriented, focusing around customer oriented objectives. And one of the things that we'll do is really cast a wide net, look to external networks and non-traditional sources to be able to develop ideas and bring those in to help companies really move the needle with either on specific competitions, or to strengthen specific products, or enter very specific markets. My last slide here is some examples of our work. I don't know how we are on timing, but I can talk a little bit.
We're good. Yeah.
In terms of we've done this innovation process development for Defense Prime. This was really around, as I described, helping them with the structure and process for innovation, kind of matching it with a stage gate approach, but looking at it a little bit differently in terms of using the venture capital mindset around how to stage investments. And so VCs will think about risks across a handful of categories. Some of it is technical risk, some of it is market risk, some of it is a people risk, and some of it is execution risk. And so what they'll do is they'll identify, well, what are the hard parts of this venture? And then what they'll do is they'll say, okay, well, these are very specific milestones that need to be met to be able to enable the next round of funding. And so doing almost like a stage gate sort of process, but it's really milestone and outcome based, ends up being incredibly powerful, where you can test the hard part first. And if that hard part can't be solved, you just stop and move on, and you don't waste a whole lot of resources on other parts of development that, if that one critical element just can't be satisfied or can't be solved. And it makes you much more efficient in your investments. There's a recognition that, you're going to put your money in a lot of areas that aren't going to go anywhere. But the whole idea is that you try to minimize the speculative capital in the high risk areas until you can extinguish those risks, and then you move on. So it's this fail fast sort of approach. We've done innovation diagnostics for a couple of big leading companies. This is really to going out and talking with them and understanding, well, where is innovation coming from? How is innovation thought of within the organization? And based on that, really coming up with a set of recommendations, either around structure, around process, around culture, around risk appetite, those sorts of things, to be more effective in innovation within their organizations. We've done work around tech transfer, so helping defense companies in particular who have developed technologies that have really been dual use, helping them get those technologies and products to the commercial market. And that's been a perennial challenge and always difficult, just because of the mindset and risk appetite, and frankly, just the business model that aerospace and defense companies have, where there's not a whole lot of appetite for speculative risk in terms of market risk. They'll take technology risk all the time, but this market risk ends up being very foreign to them. So helping them through that process has been quite interesting. We've done a couple of projects around development of new adjacent businesses, so helping customers really understand their current assets and capabilities, as well as kind of extending their understanding of what their customers' problems are. So it's not just around what customers are looking for, but it's more about understanding how they are acting and behaving, and trying to maybe more clearly articulate very specific problems that should be solved, where there will be demand. And then the last category here was around proposal support. We helped a client with they were pursuing a NASA opportunity, and one of the things they were interested in is, because the NASA customer was interested in it, was an innovation capability. And so we designed an innovation engine process and really described how it was going to work and how it was going to work in collaboration with the customer to achieve the customer's goals around ongoing advances while managing risk, and how our client, the contractor, was going to support that. And so there was some very specific reviewer feedback around this distinctive capability that really made that offering differentiated. So let me stop here. This is kind of an overview of how we think about innovation and how innovation can really be impactful in terms of differentiating and competitiveness. And we think about innovation not so much around pie in the sky science and technology, but more around how it's impactful to our business and either in terms of differentiation or growth.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Alan. I know that these concepts have led to some really interesting work for the group. And I like that you've included the last example in a NASA proposal, because I think one of the ways that we are differentiated in marketplaces is we have this unique ability to pull the thread from strategy to the proposal effort, and then all the way to program execution. I think that's a great example of how we were able to combine our unique expertise around those different parts of the program phase,
Right.
into a specific, one specific engagement to truly have an impact.
Right. I think you think about innovation in and of itself, AJ, when you came back to the firm in 2013, one of the first things that was said was that we're going to move left of the RFP.
Right.
And, this is way left of the RFP.
Yeah.
In terms of the types of things that we've got the kinds of cases we're running, the types of work that we're doing with clients that ultimately lead to a variety of different opportunities for us, which could be additional strategy work. It could be proposal work. It could even be post-award work and helping with the planning, with the engineering, with any number of, the project management around all these different types of innovations.
Yeah. And I think, and Alan's been very helpful to actually how we thought about our own company transformation over the last several years.
That's right.
I think if we went back and looked at it, we actually used a considerable number of those elements in the 10 types of innovation in terms of how we've moved this company forward. So,
I mean, Todd's a great example. Todd's a great example of that. And Alan has helped us, with that project since its inception.
That's right. Well, thank you. Thank you. If any of you would like some more information on kind of our firm's approach to innovation, and this deck, I think, will actually be on our learning management system. We'll probably get it up by the beginning part of next week, and always just reach out to headquarters if you think there's an opportunity for us to have a conversation with any of the clients you're working with around some of these concepts. So I think this is some of the more interesting work that we've been doing over the years that really distinguishes us from some of our what you might consider as our traditional competitors.
And
it's really a hot topic, right? And so it's always a fun thing for clients to talk about, because everybody wants to be innovative, everybody wants to be forward thinking, and I think a lot of times people struggle with it. I mean, is innovation about getting a bunch of Legos and M&Ms in a conference room with whiteboards and just coming up with crazy ideas? And our answer is, there's a place for that, but that's not innovation.
Right.
It ends up being a lot more, it needs to be a lot more structured for it to be impactful. And the structure in terms of the processes, the structure in terms of how you do that brainstorming, the structure in terms of how you develop very specific offerings that really meet customer needs. It goes back to that definition I had on the first page around it's got to be something that is meaningful to a customer and ends up being a product or service that somebody's willing to pay for.
Right.
Indeed.
Absolutely. In fact, I think even just some of it is getting innovation in how you're thinking about your own business. The work that we did at, for some of the healthcare companies that we've worked for over the last year, some of the innovation that was done there is really innovations and insights to influence direction, right? And there we took, Alan and their management consulting team took some very different directions in terms of how they help those clients develop the insights, and that's where part of that innovation was.
Sure. Well, hey, thank you very much, Alan. Much appreciated.
Pleasure.